Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today, which is surrounded and focused around QMetry for Jira. The agenda for today, or the topics that we'll be covering, initially, the installation and enablement. The key reason we're covering this is to ensure that everybody who gets interested in deploying and evaluating QMetry for Jira on your instances and playing around with it, you have an evaluation instance of that available over Marketplace and how you can configure it from your Jira and inside from your Jira itself. Then we'd also quickly cover the next things that you need as you start your trial of QMetry. That would be the support ecosystem that we offer around QMetry for Jira. How you can, after installing QMetry as well, have entire control over the plugin or the app within your Jira ecosystem as well is what we'll be covering under QMetry project configurations. Then we come to the real part of test management that QMetry offers in the next bit after that. We'll be covering the test authoring, the varied ways of creating your test cases, varied versions or types of test cases that you can create within your QMetry for Jira application. How you can plan, record, and execute your test assets and pull up exhaustive reports out of QMetry. We'll also be covering the exploratory testing aspect of QMetry, which is very, very unique to QMetry in this particular space. Right? So let's quickly get into action. We'll soon move on to the tool. Let me quickly switch the screen. I would resume the screen sharing as soon as we are onto the product or onto the tool itself. So I have gone ahead and resumed the screen sharing. This is your typical Jira screen as you would be working in your Jira instance. You'd be pretty familiar with it. So the first way of quickly getting your hands on to QMetry for Jira is you can go to your Marketplace. As a Jira user, you'd be pretty familiar about the Marketplace. You can look it up. So you can specifically look up for QMetry in this space, and we have multiple apps that support test management within your Atlassian ecosystem. This is the app that you're looking at, which is QMetry for Jira. Depending on your installation, this webinar is more directed towards cloud, so you would just go ahead and say cloud, initiate by filling in some information, and that will quickly give you access on the installation of your app within your Jira instance itself. The second bit is going into your admin access, going into the apps, where you can go to find new apps, look up for QMetry, and it will quickly give access to two kinds of apps, specifically around test management. But do remember, you're looking for QMetry for Jira, which is our test management app. This is the one, which is the test management app that would be offered within your Jira ecosystem. This is the Jira integration that we offer for a standalone instance itself. Right? So once you easily and quickly downloaded your QMetry instance, once you go to your Jira tab, you would see the QMetry icon into your menu under the Jira software. One thing that I quickly wanted to highlight after you install your QMetry app is that you have entire control over this app after installation as well. QMetry offers extreme flexibility on which projects you want to enable this on. And there are a lot of projects that teams have within their ecosystem that are not directly linked to project management or test management itself. For example, they are having those for timekeeping or various other purposes, right? So you would want to go ahead, select the project that you're working on to, and enable QMetry for those specific projects where you'd want to incorporate your test management bit into. So I'm in policy market project, and under the project settings, you would see QMetry project settings. So here, and it's again a one-time activity which an admin can perform. So under this tab, you would be specifically be able to turn on and off QMetry's tab in varied issue type. Now, what I mean by that, whenever teams are looking at test management in any ecosystem, may it be standalone or within your Jira ecosystem, there are two aspects that you specifically look at in terms of coverage or traceability. The first aspect is story or requirement coverage. So there are, out of our experience, we know that there are a lot of teams that consider issue type as user story very specifically as requirements, but there are a lot of teams that also consider other issue types, for example, custom issue types like requirements, or maybe Jira issue type like epics as requirements, and they would want to set up the traceability to test cases, executions, and issues. So you can, from that aspect, by default, all of this will be enabled. You can disable it, and from that aspect, you'll be able to link and test cases and set up the traceability. Also, from the bugs aspect, if you would want to see on your issues the number of test cases linked to those, their execution logs, and all the details, you can enable or disable those issue types that you treat as bugs within your Jira ecosystem. The next bit, that is more from the configuration, the overall project administrative perspective and reflection of your test management app within your projects. Now we move on to the permissions. These permissions are very, very specific to your test management application. Jira offers excellent aspects of defect management, project management. However, it is very, very restrictive in terms of having the access, tighter authorization and access rights to different user groups. And hence, we offer this very tight user role authorization and access permissions within QMetry, where for a specific project, you can provide granular control to different users in terms of what they can access in different modules and different features, integration capabilities, the way they can access the data, export or import assets in and out of the system, right? So this will offer an additional layer of security or additional layer of permissions within your Jira instance specific to your test management. Now, I would like to take you back to your QMetry tab in your Jira menu. So if you go to the Jira menu and click onto the QMetry tab, you'll be able to see the test management tab here. Now, once we go to the test management tab, we'll commence with the end-to-end workflow on how to create test cases, execute them, pull out reports. But before I do that, I'll take a quick moment to draw your attention to the configurations. The pointers that I'm highlighting ahead of the session is because we'll be referring to this during the next course of presentation. Now, in the configurations, you have extreme control and flexibility on how you want to address your executions, how do you want your executions to be reflected in the hierarchical structure, the custom fields, the workflow, so on and so forth. For example, at project level, you can have your own execution statuses beyond the standard ones that we offer. You can have your own test management linked priority environments. What we mean by environment in QMetry, and this is what I would be tagging and referring to frequently on execution screen, is basically to define your test environments, test platforms, or test configurations against which you would want to record your executions onto. Now, these platforms can be desktop operating systems, mobile handsets, browsers, or maybe simple, room temperature. It can be anything specific to what you want to record your execution onto, may it be manual or automated. You can have your own components, labels, and priority fields, as I mentioned earlier. One very, very specific feature that most of the end users really love about QMetry is data parameterization. As in line to the industry terminologies, we offer these parameters in QMetry. They'll help you embed real-time combinations of your assets in test cases to compare it with different permutations and combinations of real-time values or real-time situations, and take a call on if the feature or the requirement or a test case passed or failed. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but under the parameter tab, you can create variables, and these variables can be placeholder of a combination of values, right? The most relatable example is authorization, and that comprises of username and password. So I've created two variables here. My password has these combinations, and username has these. So you create a variable here, and then you input the combination values, a list of values that you'd want to select from while you're creating a test case or a data parameterized test case, right? In terms of preferences, what we offer the flexibility to end users is to decide how you want your test steps execution status to be reflected at the test case level. If you select this as yes, that means you want test case statuses to be rolled up at test case level and test case status to be rolled down at the step level. If you want both of these to be exclusive to each other, you can just turn this off and it'll disable it across QMetry, right? So you have the entire control depending on to the logic or the test management flow that you perform at your organization. You can leverage this feature in QMetry. QMetry offers exhaustive open APIs to let you have QMetry talk to varied third-party tools. Every aspect or every use case that you can perform from the GUI of QMetry, you can perform using or leveraging exhaustive APIs that we offer in QMetry in terms of creations, updates, or deletion of assets. Do remember that these APIs are very well strongly secured and covered with user role authentication and authorization. So they're highly, highly secure, right? In terms of statuses, QMetry has extreme workflow statuses, extremely flexible workflow statuses, and goes beyond what Jira offers. And that's why we offered it separately, because Jira has certain set of standard statuses that cannot be very well extended to test assets. So we offer these workflow statuses for test cases, test cycles, and test plans that you can leverage and utilize it across your test management. Now, apart from the standard fields that we offer by default, you can create as many custom fields of different types, and that can be extended across all of the test assets in QMetry. Excuse me. In case in terms of project syncing, we offer this feature. If you want to keep a tab on what changes were made in terms of all of these configurations panel, if there are multiple administrators at the project level, you have the entire log handy in here. Also, there are a lot of industries that requires this for audit purposes, right? So this is all in terms of the configurations. We now move on to the test management. So the test management screen, as you see, as soon as you kind of land onto the test management piece, it'll be very, very visible that QMetry offers a very quick, seamless multitasking supporting interface. But what I mean by that is all of the test assets can be visible in a tab through fashion within the single screen itself, right? So if I go to test cases, let me just quickly minimize this. If I go to test cases, you'd be able to see that I see all my test cases here in the list view at the root folder or an individual folder. So in this folder hierarchy, you can arrange, organize, and manage your test cases depending on to the modules, tasks, or different aspects that you want to organize your test cases into. And you'll also be able to view all of your test cases with the relevant fields that interest you as an individual user, because this view is not restrictive. There are all the combination of standard and custom fields that you can pull in on this particular screen. Also, you'd be able to run an exhaustive search, including all the standard and custom fields. And if I want to look up for my test cases by the assignee, if I want to see what test cases were assigned to my senior tester between a specific time and date or linked to a specific story, I can run a combination of searches and run an exhaustive search of my test cases, select multiple test cases, and perform various bulk operations, right? So I can bulk edit or update test cases. If there are all test cases that are high priority, I want to assign it to a senior tester, I can do that. Or maybe I want to link all the test cases that are linked for regression to a specific story in terms of traceability, I can do that. I can also move test cases between folders, right? Or I can reuse them. That means I can create a copy of that test case and use it in another folder if I would want to. It's very, very common. Let me just clear this filter. It is very, very common to want to have the flexibility to import test cases from other tools or even from Excel. So, if interested, we can absolutely talk about the migration capabilities that we offer from varied other test management apps to QMetry for the users who are considering moving away from something very flexible and something very, very efficient in terms of offering end-to-end test management capabilities within Jira ecosystem. But looking at the screen, this is the screen that you'd see when you want to import your test cases from an Excel sheet. We have an end-to-end guide here as well to assist you real quick. But all you need to do is upload the file, which should have your data in a columnar format. There is no specific template or anything to be followed. The next thing that you do is map the fields in QMetry for test cases to fields in your Excel sheet, and click on import. It'll import all your test cases in this particular folder that you select here, and have any specific default field values for existing fields and other configurations. So it's very, very easy. It's a three-step procedure to make an import into QMetry. Now, you can easily create a test case by clicking on the test case tab here. Let me take you to a very simple pre-created test case. As you see here, the look and feel and the GUI is completely unanimous across the product. You would see a quick tap through of any test asset that you look at. Currently, we are on a test case called login data parameterization example. So you have the summary, which will be unique to this particular test case with this particular ID. This is the ID. Across QMetry, you would see that the first two digits or the alphabets point to your, the shortcut key or acronym for your project in Jira, which is policy market here. Next one is for module. This is test cases, so I see TC, and 17 is the number of the test case, right? So this is the summary. I provide a description. All my standard fields will be visible here. Apart from some of the fields that we understood earlier in terms of the priority, status, and assignee, you also have the ability to tag a test case to a specific sprint and Jira fixed version. This points to your Jira field. You can also mention estimated time. Now, across QMetry, we help testing teams in terms of planning of individual test assets, executions, and overall execution cycles. So as a test author, you can mention here what you believe would be an estimated time to execute this test case, right? On top of this, if you feel these are very restrictive, you have any specific custom specific fields that you record at test case level, you can create custom fields relevant to this, and you'll be able to see those custom fields under the custom field section. Now, across QMetry, we offer exhaustive versioning mechanism. Currently, I'm on version number 2 of this particular test case. I can see the previous version, how it looked like. I can also track the changes made from one version to another. So I can see here that this particular test case in version number 2, post that. These were the changes that were made to bring it to that specific version, right? If I want to create a new version, if I want to make any changes that are specific and relevant to be noted as a new version, I can click on create a new version and start making the changes between this version and a newer version that I want to bring in at a later stage. This is about the framework or the layout or the insight or parameters linked to this particular test case. We go to the steps of the test case. So this is where you define your steps. I'll come back to the parameters in a little bit. Now, you can, this is rich text symbols. You can add a whole lot of highlighting and embed a lot of insights that you'd want to at the step, test data, or expected outcome level. You can also reorder this, make attachments, clone any steps, and paste it. If there's a repetitive step with minimal changes, you can do that as well. From here, this test case has only 3 steps. You have multiple steps here. You can look it up and perform whatever updates you would need to. You can also quickly reorder steps if you need to. Now, one thing that I wanted to quickly highlight on this particular screen is, if you remember, on the configurations tab, under the parameters, we had defined 2 parameters as variables called username and password. You can embed them here, like I'm doing right now. And when you actually select those, these were the pre-fed data values that we did in the configurations tab, right? So if the list value will appear, you can select both and create a combination of real-time values that you'd want to see on the execution screen, replacing this, so your tester can test your specific application or feature with these combinations and take a call if your test case passed or failed under this specific situation or combination of username and password, right? You can also make multiple attachments, submit proofs or guidelines or any expected precondition situations, image or documents that you'd want to attach at the design level as an author, which would be available for your testers to compare or see or refer to on the execution screen. This particular test case, in terms of executions, you can see the entire execution log of this test case, the execution result, the summary, fixed version, which build it was executed on, what platforms it was executed on, how it fared, who executed it, in which specific version of the test case it was executed, and if there was a bug linked, what was it, right? So you have the entire execution log here that you can work on to. From traceability aspect, you can create a test case and link stories, or you're working on a story, you want to look up a test case and then link it. It's possible both the ways. So since we are on the test case screen, I'm going to go ahead and click on link stories. Now, across QMetry, we offer exhaustive reusability across projects, right? So you created an asset in a specific project, you want to reference it or link it in another project, you'd be able to do that. That's what I'm demonstrating here. I can look up for stories in different projects and link my test cases to it. Again, you can also search for your test assets by different aspect. All right, I see. All right, I just thought that there was some ping and wanted to check if everybody could see and hear everything all right. So going back to the screen, so from here you can search for your assets by summary, priority, status, and look up for your stories likewise. You can click on multiple stories and link it to this particular test case. So there can be many-to-many relationship in terms of traceability between requirements and test cases. Now, if you go to this particular story, and this is how your view would look like. What I meant by disabling your issue type under story tab for requirements for test cases or for test management tab is, if you disable your test management tab for policy market project for user story, you would not see this test management piece under this issue type, right? You want to enable it if you want to link your test cases to that particular issue type as a story or an issue, and see the list of all the linked test cases and their executions. So this, as a business analyst, if I'm working on this story, in my story itself, I can see the list of all my test cases linked to this particular story, their workflow status, what version they were linked into, priority, and as well the execution log, right? So I don't need to go to reports, I don't need to pull up any additional filters or do any extra work. On my story page itself, I can see the entire log of the test cases that are linked to it, the latest execution status, on what platform, who executed it, and other details, right? Now, this was about the test cases that are already linked to it, or have been linked to this particular story. If I want to filter this test case, there are only 5 test cases here, but if I want to filter this test cases, I have various filter options. I would also be able to add test cases, beyond this. If I would want to complete the coverage of this particular story, if the story had been modified and if there was a need to write more test cases or link existing test cases, I can do that from here as well. I can also add test cases directly to this particular screen, right? So that's in brief about the view from traceability aspect or from a story page itself. If you also offer collaborative mode, if there are multiple stakeholders that are working on this particular test cases or related to this test case, they can enter a collaborative mode and add comments. And here you'd be able to see, from audit purposes, the entire version log or audit log for your test cases, right? So that's in brief about your test cases in QMetry. Let's go ahead and talk about test cycles. Now, test cycles are basically combinations of different test cases that you want to execute against different platforms or test environments, on different builds, on different, by different testers or by different geographies, and compare the test results and pull up reports and gauge the success of a specific release, right? So again, across QMetry, you'd be able to organize your test assets, inclusive of cycles, in folder hierarchy. So again, you can create and manage your test cycles in different folders depending on to how you want to organize them. So let's go ahead and see this view. Now, under this test cycle, I see the list of all my test cycles here. If I would want to see additional details from overall planning purposes, I can see those details as well for my test cases. In terms of, when was it planned to be started, when was it planned to be completed, estimated time of overall test cycle versus actual time that it needed to be completed on, so on and so forth. Right. So on this list view itself, I would be able to see all these details. I'd also be able to filter my test cycles by all of these informations in terms of filter values. Right. And you can also feed in additional information. So, for this particular test cycle, if I want to see how many test cases and defects were linked to it, I can see it right here. So you can run exhaustive filters, you can add or modify, add information or data in this columnar view, in this list view in columnar fashion here as well. So if I want to pull up in existing test cycle, this is how it would appear. Again, you have all of these standard fields here. You can tag in a planned start date and end date here, and the custom fields would be visible here. If you want to see what are the list of additional test cases that are linked here, you would be able to see the list of all the additional test cases, the linked test cases here that would be appearing. You can also link existing test cases. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can look up for test cases from other projects, and there are exhaustive search feature by which you can add test cases entirely in a folder. If I'm in this test cycle I've created for regression purposes, I want to select all test cases and sketch it for execution, I can do that from here as well. Right? Again, you can also perform various bulk operations. So, I can search for my test cases, and I can maybe assign it to a tester, change the execution status of all the test cases at one go in this cycle, unlink them if they are no longer relevant, change the environment if I want to execute all of them now in a different platform. I can do that as well from here, right? So if I want to test it on Firefox, I can do that. Or maybe if I want to now execute them on a different build, right? From build 2, I have to now execute them on build 3. I can do that. Relevant to, had it scoped in all test cases that I want to execute, and also tagging the platform against which and build against which I want to execute them. Let me tag this one on build 2 as well. Okay, so let's say build 2.0. Right, so now I'll just go, it's all ready for execution, so I'll click on execute. As soon as you click on execute tab, you would see the list of all the test cases in this particular cycle on the left hand side, and on the right hand side you can pull up individual test cases and carry out your execution in detail. Right, so this is my test case number 2, which says successful logout. I see the details of my test case here and the steps here for me to go ahead and execute it. I can mention that the environment has been tagged, the build number. I can now record the actual execution time that it took to complete the execution, right? So it will be compared with my estimated execution time, and I can also, tag in any additional information or insight into it. I can add any comments that I would want to. I can, log a defect at test case level. You have the ability to log a defect at the step level as well as test case level. You can link an existing issue or create a new one, and you'd also be able to go ahead and record the execution at step level. So you can see the expected outcome, you can enter the actual result, comments, and log defects, make attachments at step level as well. Now, one thing that I wanted to quickly highlight is the data parameterization, how different your parameterized test case would look like. So when you parameterize your test case, all the combinations will be reflected as a reference in the individual test case. What I mean here and want to highlight here is that QMetry tackles with data parameterization very, very smartly. It does not create a duplicacy. It does not create a redundancy. It will not create copies of test cases to accommodate those references or combination of real-time values. It will reference the test case multiple times under the same execution with references to individual combination of real-time values. So if you see here, the username and password steps under combination of Rupal and Rupal@123 is here. And under Brijesh and Brijesh123 is under here, right? So you'd be able to parallelly, sequentially execute your test cases under different combination of those parameters and take a call on if the particular test case passed or failed. Other thing that I wanted to highlight is under the same test cycle, under the same situations or circumstances of environment, build, assignee of the tester, you would be able to execute the same test case multiple times, maybe on a different environment, or maybe by a different tester, or maybe by a different build. And you can see the execution tab, executions of these of the same test case in different situation on the same execution screen itself. You'd also be able to filter the test cases. If there are multiple test cases under this particular test cycle, you'd want to filter it and execute them specifically. You'd be able to do that from here. You'd also be able to quickly check the execution logs, right? If there are executions performed, you'd want to see what happened when, and you can also quickly check the graphical view of the overall status of test case execution under this cycle, as well as the number of bugs that were raised if there were, right? So that's in brief about the test execution, and to be very, very specific. We also have test plans here. Now, test plans have been introduced for test management teams to help them plan their executions at the global level. So test cases are assets that you want to execute under test cycles, and test plan provide you a platform to combine your cycles and sketch a planning in terms of timelines. So if you look at a test plan, let me open one. You can create a test plan and define the date. You can sketch and group or scope in all the cycles that you want to actually plan or keep a tab or track of under this particular test cycle tab of this particular test plan. So here you can see all the planned start date of a cycle, planned end date, actual time, estimated time, and this can be judged, gauged, and kept a track of under this particular test plan. Again, at test plan level, again, you can make attachments, enter collaborative mode, and keep audit of or track of the updates made. At the test plan as well, you have the ability to, globally define any of the planning date or any other information that you'd want. And you'll also be, so if you see here, I've tagged in these details, you'd also be able to run filters and specifically look up for a plan out of multiple plans that you charted out for your team. We have more than 25 plus reports across QMetry to help you keep a tab on your overall testing activities for different test assets. So if you look at test cases reports, we have, in terms of authoring, helped you keep a track of test cases by your test management workflow statuses, and there are various filters that you can pull up. So if you see here, there are a combination of specifically defined input fields by which you want to pull up your graph or report onto. By execution, if you just want the latest ones or the overall ones, if you want to look at it from authoring or execution perspective. So this is more from workflow statuses. You can again extract it outside of the system and perform whatever analysis beyond this on the data or on the graph from here. You also have test cases by priority, component, label. You can also keep a tab on test cases that were planned versus test cases that were not planned, test cases that have defects, right? So if you're looking at test cases, if majority of my test cases yet are defined in terms of defects or have been kind of completed and closed otherwise. In terms of executions, you can keep a track of executions by overall effort, by effort summary. Let me quickly highlight as executions by different other fields. For example, if you want to take go-to-market decisions of the sort of browser compatibility, for example, if I am a web-based application, and if I want to gauge, how my application is fared, from this particular graph, it's very, very visible that it's kind of pretty fairly compatible on Chrome and Opera, 100% compatible on Opera, right? I mean, there are various other filters that you can run to take a call, but just on same lines, you can tag that. You can also tag that by assignees. If you want to look up how my tester has been performing in terms of test assets. So you see, Bridget has been quite active in terms of what he needed to execute versus what Rupal has been very, very passive. She needs to actually be called and taken to task at, right? So that and more. We also have defect report, where you'll be able to keep a tab on your defect by build environment, which is the most common found defect across different platforms. You can also see resolved issue verification, 2D defect metrics in terms of defect priority versus the workflow status. One thing that I wanted to quickly highlight your attention to, and something that is very, very vital to any testing team, is traceability metrics. Now, what we mean by traceability metrics is your entire coverage, from requirements to number of test cases that it covers, to the executions of these test cases, and the defects if they were logged. Now, again, you can pull it up by various filter criteria of your test case. If I want to look at only test cases that were of high priority with the most severe defects linked to it or critical defects linked to it only for the latest execution, there are different combinations that you can pull it up. And what you can see is, if I pull it up by requirements, what you can see is this particular requirement is linked to this particular test case that were executed this many times on different cycles. This was the defect that was logged to, right? So this is the kind of branching approach that we offer to quickly create a mind map of how your requirement traceability looks like. Now, there are a lot of organizations that treat defects to be vital. In that case, you can also have defect at the root and do your analysis, or maybe test cases at the root. So the choice is absolutely yours, right? I know Disha is just pinging me. I see there's this quick 5 minutes that I have to cover the rest of the aspect. But what I wanted to highlight, I think in terms of the test management aspect, has almost been covered. I'd quickly move on to the exploratory testing bit, which is very, very unique to QMetry, very, most light, apart from the other features and functionality or usability aspect of QMetry, is the exploratory testing feature. As the name suggests, this feature helps you auto-document auto creation of your test cases from your web activities. It offers something much beyond session recording, screenshot capturing, or much beyond your repetitive activities that your testers perform on regular basis on manual testing. So we offer this Chrome extension, which is again part of QMetry for Jira. Do remember, everything that you see in today's session, including exploratory testing, import, export, open APIs to integrate with third-party tools, automation APIs that we'll soon talk about, all of this is very much part of QMetry for Jira, included into it. There's no additional app to be installed, no additional bucks to be paid to do that. It's very simple in terms of pricing and licensing model as well. If time permits, we will visit that. So coming back to the screen, we have this exploratory testing bit. You can download it from the Chrome Marketplace. Once you download it, you'll be able to see something like this on your particular screen. Let me quickly refresh. I have two things on my screen, so I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this. So once you download this QMetry for Jira exploratory testing app, you would be able to configure it with your instance, right? So what you do from here is you just go ahead and click onto this, and I've already configured it. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I want to look up for, or maybe test QMetry. And I'm a QMetry manual tester. So I'm just going to go ahead and look up to QMetry website. So what we offer here in QMetry is the ability to record every screen activity that you perform in terms of website testing. You can log a defect in between if you would want in Jira. You can leave voice annotations. You can leave, you can pause a session in between and perform any additional capabilities that you need to, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and look up for QMetry. So we go to www.qmetry.com and open up QMetry website and just go ahead and perform the analysis. Okay, so let's open Zoom website. And what QMetry will let you do is whenever you've recorded the session, so I'm just going to go ahead and look at some of these activities. right? It will capture all the input values that you would perform. I can log a defect right in between here into my Jira instance, or I can just go ahead and sign up for this, right? So I would say, and I'll just go ahead and pause the session. So in the favor of time, we'll come back to QMetry as soon as QMetry completes uploading the data. You just come back here and refresh this. Ideally, it will come up immediately. I'm just in a hurry, so I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this. If you see here, the session has been completed. 9 of my screen clicks, I mean 100% of my screen clicks has been recorded, every screen captured. It goes beyond what I told earlier. So this is what it does. It automatically records all of your input information, all of your activities, and it will convert. It will also create an event log. There are a lot of industries that record for this request for the event log. We have this event log for audit purposes. I didn't log any defect. Had you done that, you would get those details. So all of the information of the platform, the start and end time, all of this is logged with the asset that you created. Now you can automatically create a test case from here on a click of a button. If I go to this particular test case, voila, my test case being created. All the input information and insight has been auto-populated here. So what you're in, and all the screenshots have been attached to this particular aspect. So what your testing teams do repetitively, monotonously, would automatically be converted while they're actually doing it for the first time into a test case very, very quickly, right? We have an automation tool called QMetry Automation Studio, which will also offer an extension to this where you can convert it into an automation script or into a BDD script as well. If you would like, you can contact us and we can absolutely schedule a demo of QMetry Automation Studio. Now, if you see here, QMetry can be integrated with wide array of automation frameworks. It can also be integrated with varied CI/CD tools, and you'd be able to see all the details that you would need to from here. Now, I'll take you to that particular screen, but before that, let me also talk about the support ecosystem. As I promised earlier, QMetry Help Guide is online. It will be available in your trial and production instance, offers all the information that QMetry has to offer with screenshots, with the guided steps, best practices, videos, everything. It's your go-to guide. We have everything that you need in terms of getting started with QMetry, or anywhere you're stuck, you can seek the assistance. For example, one thing that I wanted to quickly highlight is the exhaustive APIs that we offer in QMetry to offer integration with automation tools and different CI/CD tools. These are the different frameworks that we offer integration with. These are the supported frameworks that we offer integration with. And you would also, let me expand this, see other CI/CD tools that we offer integration with along with this. We also have exhaustive open APIs, as I mentioned earlier, and this is the API array, which will kind of offer you all the assistance that you need. The user friendliness of the open API documentation that we offer here is beyond explanation. It's extremely user friendly. It is very, very helpful for the teams that are not very automation savvy as well, or we're not very coding savvy as well. There are a lot of teams that we talk to very frequently that are actually completely manual but moving to automation, right? So for those teams as well, our automation API and open API documentations are very, very user friendly. For example, if you are looking at creating a test case, you go to test cases tab, go to create new test case tab, and once you come to create new test case tab, you would have let me switch to example. So you would have the code snippet depending on to whatever framework you're using. You can select the framework and it will give you a code snippet below. So if you see here, there's my code snippet. And again, it will also act as your, REST consort. So you would be able to enter your API key here under the body. You can mention the project where you'd want to create this. And you can say, I would want to now create my test case. So that is how simple it is to create a test case. If you see here, 201 response has been received and a new test case by PMTC 23 has been created. So if I go to QMetry, let me show you what test case name I gave, sample one test case, open API. A new test case by that name has been created and it's been open here. So that's how simple it is to access any of the aspects of test management in QMetry. Also, we have our 24/5 support. So, QMetry support team is again Jira service desk. We stringently follow support SLAs. You'll regularly be kept posted on the new releases, on any enhancement requests that you raised, any issues that you raised, and our support team or support engineers will be in touch with you in terms of communicating with the requests that you made over the support portal. Right, and we have these regular webinar series or video series for any team members who are onboarding or for any evaluators who are exhaustively evaluating QMetry and need any assistance. You can reach out to us. If you have any query, feel free to reach us at info@QMetry.com or sign up for free trial of QMetry from our website. Thank you.